this breathing video, we're going to work on something called a diaphragm stretch. Pretty simple. The top of the diaphragm is attached to rib number 6. The bottom of the diaphragm is attached to the anterior side of your lumbar spine. As we breathe, that diaphragm needs to go up and down. Many people, we hold our stomach in tight, or under stress, we're breathing a little bit high up. Or we've just basically learned how to breathe incorrectly. Maybe because we've had some sort of injury, or because we've sustained some sort of stress in our life. Good rule of thumb is to learn how to stand nice and tall via the crown of your head and let the belly go. But essentially we need a little bit more than that sometimes. We need to create some sensory awareness in the muscles for inhalation, and of course some sensory awareness of the muscles used for exhalation. So a diaphragm stretch is really going to help that because it's going to actually help move the diaphragm. As you exhale, you want your diaphragm to come up, okay? And actually, we want to ensure that when we breathe, we're getting out as much air as possible. We don't want to leave any extra air behind. Anything extra is going to be considered toxic to the body, and that's going to actually increase our general stress load, okay? So a diaphragm stretch is going to do a couple of great things for us. It's going to help reduce overall stress, but it's also going to make the act of breathing more efficient because the muscle itself is just going to work better. It's also going to get you more in tune to actually what's happening on the inside of your body. So to do this, essentially what you have to do is lie on your back with your knees bent. There is a really important piece of the puzzle that needs to be done, and that's going to be a posterior pelvic tilt. So essentially that's tucking the bum under, okay? As you tuck the bum under and complete the diaphragm stretch, you may feel a very light stretch in your back, and that's totally fine and totally normal. And as you practice this enough times, the stretch may not necessarily go away, but it's just going to become a more comfortable. But the end result is going to be a nice fluid breath, very comfortable breath, and a more powerful breath for your specific sport or your daily activity. So what you're going to do is you're going to get onto your back, and in this position you need to assess, am I comfortable lying on my back like this? I myself am very comfortable lying on my back, but if I had my head tilted back here and I couldn't seem to really pull my chin down, then I would want to go ahead and I would want to use a pillow to elevate myself a little bit. I feel pretty good, so I'm actually not going to pick the pillow. So as I'm down, my hands are by my sides. The next thing I want to do is I want to create that posterior tilt in my pelvis. So as you do this, make sure you don't lift your tailbone off the ground too much. You want to try to keep your spine low. So you've got a couple things going on there. So go ahead, tilt. Very simply, we want to inhale through our nose, and we want to exhale out our mouth. But during that exhale, we want to actually let all of that air go. And this is the key. When you think you've let all the air go, I want you to keep pushing. Don't worry, you're never going to actually be able to exhale all the air out of your lungs completely. We're just not designed to be able to do that. But effectively, the more we exhale, the more we exhale, we're going to drive that diaphragm up, effectively stretching that diaphragm. So it's going to look like and sound something like this. Of course, there's one more piece of the puzzle, and that's going to be with the arms. I'm going to lift my arms overhead during the last portion of my exhale, effectively increasing the diaphragm stretch. In my nose, out my mouth, all the air, while creating the posterior tilt. Okay, not that fancy, but essentially I just tried to keep on exhaling, and I was also thinking about continuing to posterior tilt my pelvis the whole time. The arms were just an added effect to get a little more of a stretch happening down there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to complete another one of those. In my nose, out my mouth, let it all go while posterior tilting. Ooh. Okay, felt really good. Now, I'm actually going to use a position to increase the sensory awareness of actually what's kind of happening. So I have a couple options. Remember, for me, my left side was the better side for me to create some sensory awareness during breath. So I could actually do that in a twofold series. I could side flexion over to the left, thereby sort of compressing that area. And so when I do breathe, I have to work a little bit harder, increasing the sensory awareness. But I could also try to hike my pelvis laterally towards my left shoulder. So I'm actually going to turn, so I'm actually turning my pelvis, creating my posterior tilt, and I'll go through that same process again. So I'm basically hiking my hip up to the left, in my nose, out my mouth. Okay, that felt pretty good. It actually felt a little different. As I was exhaling, I was pulling my hip up, and I was also creating that posterior tilt at the same time. So what I want you to do is I want you definitely to practice just the regular flat diaphragm exhale with your arms going overhead. If you want to add a little extra to it, go ahead and select the side that you got that sensory input for a better side to work. So we can either side flexion the body, or you can lift the pelvis up to that shoulder. So for me, it was left. I just brought my left hip, side of my pelvis up to my left shoulder, all while creating that posterior tilt. So go ahead, have some fun.